Hello guys, welcome back to On the Case Study with me. Today we are diving deep into a case that is beyond disturbing, one that shocked an entire country and forced society to confront an ugly truth about abuse, trust, and betrayal. Before we begin, I want to issue a strong content warning. This case involves explicit discussions of rape, sexual abuse, and extreme violence. Some of the details are so graphic that they might be deeply upsetting, especially for women and sensitive viewers. If you are someone who finds it difficult to listen to such topics, I highly recommend that you do not watch this video. Your mental health and comfort are important, and you should prioritize them. However, if you still want to learn about this case but prefer an audio-only experience, but for those of you who are prepared to hear the full story, let's get started. Imagine stumbling upon a collection of tens of thousands of photographs and videos, a digital library filled with footage of disturbing and unimaginable acts. Now imagine that as you go through these pictures, something begins to feel eerily familiar. At first, the faces in the images might seem like strangers, but as you examine them closely, a chilling realization washes over you. This is exactly what happened to Gisele Pelicot, a 72-year-old grandmother from France. One day, as the police laid out a series of photos before her, she felt her breath catch in her throat. The woman in the pictures, the one caught in vulnerable, degrading situations, looked just like her. But how was that possible? Gisele had no memory of these events, no recollection of being in those situations, and no idea who these men were. The room in the pictures seemed familiar too. It was a bedroom she had spent decades sleeping in. Then, the most horrifying realization struck her like a bolt of lightning. The woman in the photos was herself. She had no idea how or when these photos were taken. But then, the police played the videos. And as soon as she heard the voice in those recordings, she felt her entire world collapse. It was the voice of her husband, Dominique Pelicot. He wasn't just present in these videos. He was giving instructions. He was orchestrating the entire thing, telling the men what to do to her, directing their every move like a depraved film director. Gisele's blood turned to ice. The man she had trusted for over 50 years, the father of her children, the grandfather of her beloved grandkids, had been drugging and violating her for over a decade. This case didn't just shatter Gisele's world. It shook all of France, sparking one of the country's first major discussions about consent, marital abuse, and the horrors of covert sexual violence. When she finally gathered the strength to speak out, Gisele made a statement that sent chills down the spine of everyone in the courtroom. "I want every rape victim to say, 'Madame Pelicot did it, and so can I.'" Today, we are going to dive deep into this horrifying case, unraveling the story of a woman who had no idea she was a victim, until it was far too late. Before we go any further, I want to take a moment to talk about something important. As many of you might already know, making true crime videos on YouTube is not easy. These cases often involve disturbing details, and due to YouTube's strict content policies, many of my videos get completely blocked. Sometimes, I have to upload highly censored versions of my videos just so they don't get taken down. But if you're someone who enjoys true crime and wants to see the uncensored, raw versions of these cases, please do subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to like. If you want to support this channel and help me continue making these deep dive crime videos, consider becoming a member today. Now, let's return to today's horrifying case. From the outside, Gisele and Dominique Pelicot seemed like a perfect couple, the kind that people admired. They met when they were just teenagers, fell in love, and got married in their early 20s. Together, they built a stable life, raising 3 children: David, Caroline, and Florine. Their love story wasn't perfect. Like every marriage, they had their ups and downs. In fact, they even divorced once, but fate always brought them back together. To their friends and family, it looked like they had an unbreakable bond. Even in their older years, they continued to stand by each other. Dominique worked as an electrician, while Gisele managed a small business. They built a life full of routine, comfort, and family traditions. But behind the facade of love and companionship, something sinister was lurking, and Gisele had no idea. As the years went by, Gisele's health began to decline in ways no one could explain. She was constantly exhausted, sleeping for long hours and waking up feeling even more drained than before. Her once strong and active body was now weak. She lost nearly 10 kilograms without any clear reason. Her hair started falling out in clumps, and she was plagued by constant pelvic pain that doctors struggled to diagnose. But the most terrifying symptom was her memory loss. Entire days would go missing from her mind. Conversations she swore she never had. Events she had no recollection of. It was as if pieces of her life were disappearing one by one. Doctors suspected Alzheimer's disease, an assumption that seemed reasonable given her age. But no one could have imagined the real reason behind her deteriorating health, because the truth was far more horrifying than any illness. On September 12, 2020, something happened that changed everything. Dominique was at a local supermarket, casually shopping like any normal day. But as he walked through the aisles, a security guard noticed something suspicious. Dominique was secretly filming under women's skirts with a hidden camera. He was caught red-handed. When the police arrested him, they had no idea what they were about to uncover. During their investigation, they seized his laptop and hard drives. And what they found inside was beyond sickening. Over 20,000 photos and videos, evidence of crimes so unspeakable they couldn't believe it. The victim in nearly every single one? Gisele. Her entire world shattered when she saw those photos for the first time. And the most terrifying part? This abuse had been happening for 10 years right under her nose. When the police officers first started going through Dominique Pelicot's hard drives, memory cards, and digital storage, they assumed they would find a few inappropriate photos, maybe some voyeuristic content from the supermarket incident. What they weren't prepared for was one of the most disturbing digital evidence archives ever discovered in a marital abuse case. There were over 20,000 photos and videos, neatly categorized and stored in multiple folders. Some files dated back to 2010, revealing that this abuse had been ongoing for at least 10 years. The videos showed Gisele in various states of unconsciousness, lying on their marital bed in hotel rooms, even in the backseat of their car. In many of them, she was completely unaware of what was happening to her. But the most horrifying part? Dominique wasn't acting alone. Multiple men appeared in the videos, men whom Gisele had never seen before in her life. Some were masked, while others were completely casual, as if they were participating in a normal social activity. And standing in the background, directing everything like a twisted filmmaker, was Dominique himself. He was instructing the men on what to do. He was laughing. In some clips, he could even be heard saying, "Don't worry, she won't remember anything." It was clear that Dominique had been drugging his wife, using strong sedatives and sleeping pills to knock her unconscious before orchestrating these sickening assaults. Medical tests would later confirm that Gisele's deteriorating health had nothing to do with natural aging. It wasn't Alzheimer's, dementia, or any medical condition. The real cause? A dangerous cocktail of sedatives that had been secretly given to her for years. Dominique had been crushing pills into her food and drink, high doses of bromazepam and zolpidem, two powerful medications that cause drowsiness, memory loss, and impaired motor skills. In large doses, these drugs erase short-term memory, making it impossible for the victim to recall events that happened while under their influence. This is why Gisele could never remember anything. This is why she always woke up exhausted, in pain, and confused. And this is why she felt like she was losing her mind for over a decade, when, in reality, her own husband had been orchestrating her worst nightmares. When the police brought Gisele in for questioning, they did so carefully. They knew that revealing this information to a 72-year-old woman, who had spent over 50 years trusting the man responsible, could have a devastating emotional impact. At first, Gisele didn't believe it. "That can't be me," she said, looking at the photos. "I would remember something like this." But as more evidence was laid out, dozens of images, different locations, various timestamps, her face turned pale. And then, they played the videos. It took only a few seconds for her to recognize Dominique's voice, She covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes wide in shock. Her breathing became shallow. She started shaking. And then, she whispered, "My God, it's true." She had spent over a decade thinking she was simply aging, becoming forgetful, or getting sick. But now, she realized the truth. Her own husband had been using her body as an object, passing her around to strangers and ensuring that she would never know. Gisele felt a deep sense of violation, betrayal, and helplessness. But she also felt something else. Rage. She wasn't just a victim. She was a woman who had been deceived, used, and manipulated. And now she wanted justice. When the police confronted Dominique Pelicot with the evidence, he didn't react like a man who had just been caught committing one of the most horrific crimes imaginable. He was calm. He simply shrugged and said, "Well, she never knew, did she?" His lack of remorse sent chills down the spines of even the most hardened investigators. He wasn't crying. He wasn't panicking. In fact, he seemed annoyed, as if the police were inconveniencing him. Eventually, he admitted to everything. Yes, he had drugged her for years. Yes, he had filmed her without her knowledge. Yes, he had invited other men to violate her. No, he didn't think it was a big deal. "I was just having fun," he said, as if his actions were nothing more than a harmless prank. The investigators were stunned. This wasn't just a monster in disguise. This was a man who had zero empathy. A man who saw his wife as a piece of property, not a human being. Dominique Pelicot was arrested immediately and charged with rape, aggravated assault, invasion of privacy, and administering harmful substances. But there was one more horrifying detail left to uncover. The police needed to find out who the other men in the videos were, and what they discovered next sent shockwaves through France. Through digital forensics, investigators were able to track down at least 8 men who had participated in the abuse. Most of them were complete strangers, men Dominique had met in underground fetish forums and dark web groups. He had posted classified ads, offering his unconscious wife as a doll for these men to use. Some of them had never even met Dominique in person. They had simply followed his instructions, arrived at his house while he was at work, and used his wife's body like a lifeless object. It was a level of depravity that was almost unimaginable. The police were able to track down and arrest several of these men, and each of them received heavy prison sentences. But Gisele's suffering was far from over, because even though Dominique was now behind bars, the damage he'd done could never be undone. At 72 years old, Gisele could have chosen to disappear from the public eye and live the rest of her life in quiet anonymity. But instead, she made a bold decision. She decided to speak out. She gave interviews, wrote articles, and appeared in documentaries, telling her story so that other women would know that this kind of abuse can happen, even in a loving marriage. She became a symbol of strength for victims of marital abuse, drug-facilitated rape, and betrayal trauma. And in the courtroom, as she faced the man who stole 10 years of her life, she stood tall and said, "You thought I would never find out. You thought I was too weak. But here I am. And I want every woman to know, if I can fight back, so can you." Dominique Pelicot was sentenced to 15 years in prison, a punishment many felt was too lenient for his crimes. But for Gisele, the biggest victory wasn't the sentence. It was the fact that she had taken her power back. This case is one of the most disturbing true crime stories I've ever covered. It's a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous predators aren't strangers. They are the people closest to us. What do you think about this case? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. I'll see you in the next video.